everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about how to divide two fractions. So what I'd like to do is take a look at the rule that we use to divide fractions, and then we'll use that rule in a couple specific examples. So first I have the rule on the screen here, a over b divided by c over d, so those are my two fractions. When I divide fractions, that is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So first, let's just talk about what a reciprocal is. So a reciprocal is when we take a fraction and we switch the numerator and the denominator. So for example, if I have the fraction a over b, the reciprocal to this is b over a. Mathematically, two things are reciprocals when their product is 1. In other words, if I take these two fractions and I multiply them together, I should end up with 1. And we can see that. We have an a in the numerator and a in the denominator. Those simplify to 1. We have a b in the numerator and a b in the denominator, and those also simplify. So everything here simplifies to 1. So why, when we divide fractions, why do we change it to multiply by the reciprocal? So I just want to quickly touch on that. So let's say I take my division problem and I rewrite it a little bit. So instead of writing with the division sign, I'm going to write this as a big fraction. So we have a fraction in the numerator, and I'm going to divide that by the second fraction, c over d. This is what we call a complex fraction. It's fractions inside of a fraction. And it's very messy. So if I wanted to kind of work with this, make it a little bit easier to handle, I can maybe look at this denominator and say, okay, I want that to simplify. Well, an easy way to make that simplify is to multiply this by its reciprocal. So in the denominator here, let's multiply this by d over c. So that will simplify to 1. But I can't just multiply the denominator by something. I need to also multiply the numerator by the same thing. So that maintains that balance between the numerator and the denominator. And d over c, and then this is still divided by d over c. This whole piece in blue, that's basically 1, right? Something divided by itself simplifies to 1. So I'm not changing the value of the fraction here. So as we said, in the denominator, this all simplifies to 1. And in the numerator, we have our two fractions. We have a over b times d over c, which is exactly what we have for our rule when dividing by fractions. Now, let's use this in a couple specific examples. So I have 2 here, and let's just go through each of these. So 2 over 5 divided by 4/3. So our process, we're going to take our first fraction, and then the second fraction, whichever fraction we're dividing by, we're going to change that to multiplying by the reciprocal. So the first one stays the same. This becomes multiplication, and then the second fraction is going to get flipped. So we end up with 2/5 times 3/4. When we multiply fractions together, we multiply the numerators, we multiply the denominators. So that's going to look like 2 times 3 over 5 times 4. So that gives me 6 over 20. And then the last thing we need to do is simplify this. So 6 and 20, it looks like we have a common factor of 2 that we can simplify. So dividing the top and the bottom by 2, we end up with 3/10. Okay, let's go through that one more time. So my second example, -3/5 divided by 7/10. So again, our first fraction is going to stay the same. So this -3/5, and we change this to multiplication. And then our second fraction, whichever one we're dividing by, we're going to change that to the reciprocal. So we get 10 over 7. Multiplying the two fractions, we multiply the numerators, so -3 times 10, and then this is going to be over the two denominators multiplied together, 7 times 5. And we end up with negative 30 over 35. And again, we'll simplify. 30 and 35, they both have a common factor of 5, so let's simplify that. So we're going to end up with here negative 6 over 7. So again, when you're dividing two fractions, we're going to change it to multiplying by the reciprocal. So whichever fraction you're dividing by, the second fraction, you're going to change that to the reciprocal, change it to multiplication, and then proceed.